For those of you who are interested in becoming a biomedical scientist but haven't been told exactly how to get into it, this video is for you. I will explain all the entry routes you can take no matter what stage you are at. Hi, my name is Abdul and I'm a fully qualified biomedical scientist working for the NHS in cellular pathology. So I'll first start by talking about exactly how I got into becoming a biomedical scientist. I took A-level biology, maths and physics. This was enough to get into my local university. Now, here's a piece of advice that not many people will tell you. If you're an A-level student and you're worried about getting the grades to get into university, I'll tell you right now, it doesn't matter what university you go into. It just matters about the degree you choose. And this is true for any course, by the way. In terms of biomedical science, I would say the degrees that do matter is if it's an accredited one and if it is an integrated one as well. And I'll explain what those mean later on in the video. Other than that, it doesn't matter what university you go into. Obviously, that's not to say don't try at school. Try and get the best grades you can, but don't put too much pressure on yourself if you don't manage to get the grades that you need to get into the university you want. Because like I said, the university itself doesn't actually matter, it's the degree itself. So as I was saying, I did a degree in biomedical science and it was luckily accredited. Now, I'll explain briefly what accreditation means. An IBMS accredited degree basically means that your degree course teaches you all the key modules necessary for clinical labs. And these modules are medical microbiology, clinical biochemistry, hematology and blood transfusion, clinical immunology, cellular pathology / histopathology, and clinical genetics. Your degree course must teach these subjects in order to be an IBMS accredited degree. So back to my journey. After a lot of stressful deadlines, lab projects, and dissertations, I managed to finish my degree. Now, I'll tell you that the difference between getting a first and just passing a biomedical science degree is not much in terms of actually becoming a biomedical scientist. All you need is a pass. But again, that's not to say that you shouldn't bother going for a first. It's just that don't worry too much if you haven't. But obviously there are benefits of getting a first. I mean, if you wanted to go into another field, then that would set you up better. So at this point I have my degree and now I need to look for jobs. I applied to every lab role I could find on Google but was unsuccessful and I kept getting rejected. The reasons that I got was that I lacked experience. I was stuck in the classic loop of can't get a job because of no experience and can't get experience because I don't have a job. So I kept applying and applying and eventually I got lucky enough to get offered a post as a lab support worker in a histology lab. Now this required me to work in the specimen reception department. I say I was lucky, but this was a band 2 position. But I finally got in on the inside and I got experience to break that cursed loop of unemployment. Now, whilst working in specimen reception, I learned a lot about pathology and how my knowledge from uni was actually quite useful because I understood the terminology that I saw on request forms, and that allowed me to separate the specimen categories. And it's completely different using your knowledge for coursework at uni compared to how you use it in real life. It was then where I realized that I really wanted to pursue this as a career and become a biomedical scientist. Now, once you get past this loop, things get a lot easier. I made a video about interview tips which should help you land a job in pathology. And I will make more videos about interview techniques and tips to help you. So if that interests you, then hit subscribe and break that cursed unemployment cycle. Now, after about 2 months in, there was a trainee BMS post that came up, which I wanted to apply for. So I'd spoken to the lab manager and he'd let me know when the job advert went live. And this is another piece of advice I would give you. Let your manager know that you're interested in these trainee positions. If you're likable and show enough determination, people will help you out. Unfortunately, this time I wasn't successful because the other person was already doing half the job as an MLA, so it was understandable that they got it. But another month later, an MLA post came up, which was their previous job. The lab manager let me know about it and I applied for it. Then I got to the interview and I tried to answer the questions as best I could. And after the interview, they called me up to give me feedback. Unfortunately, I was unsuccessful again. And another person outside the organization got the job. And this person just simply had more experience than me. So yeah, it made sense why I lost out on that one. And I was told I didn't answer the questions very well. But I didn't let that stop me. And I continued to learn more and more and more whilst working as a specimen receptionist. Eventually, 2 months later, another Band 5 trainee BMS post came up. I applied for that and again let the lab manager know. He was able to close it earlier due to the sheer volume of applicants and managed to shortlist me. Now, during the lead up to the interview, I was speaking to a bunch of scientists and getting their advice about what questions I should expect and how to answer them. I had access to all the documentation of all the protocols on how to do the job as a biomedical scientist, and I learned it to such a detailed level. The day of the interview comes, and I had used all the knowledge and skills and techniques that I had learned over the time leading up to it. I knew all the answers to the questions. So I did the interview. Again, I was called up to get feedback, and I was successful. So now I've got my post as a trainee BMS. I need to complete an IBMS registration training portfolio. Now, this is a necessary requirement to become a BMS. I'll explain in a separate video in depth of what exactly an IBMS registration training portfolio entails, but for the purpose of this video, I'll explain it in brief. Essentially, the IBMS registration training portfolio is showing the IBMS that you are capable of doing the job as a biomedical scientist. And you do this by gathering evidence to show your competence in the areas that are required. Now, I managed to complete this in around 8 months, and candidates typically spend around a year trying to complete this. I then went through the whole verification process where an IBMS examiner assesses your portfolio and check if you have met the standards that are set out. I then had to do a lab tour after they assessed my portfolio, and then at the end I got asked questions by the examiner. From then I was able to get registered with the HCPC, and that was it. I could officially become a biomedical scientist. Now that is the exact route I took, and it's considered one of the easiest routes or most common routes that people go through, where you get an accredited degree, find a trainee BMS post, complete the IBMS registration training portfolio, get verified by the IBMS, and obtain the certificate of competence. Then you can get on the HCPC register and officially be a BMS. There are easier ways of doing it. That is only if you did an integrated degree at university where you do your portfolio as part of the program, but you have to agree with a pathology lab beforehand for them to train you and help you complete your registration training portfolio. After that, you could just simply apply to the HCPC and get registered there and then. And after that, you should be able to get a BMS job pretty easily, but you still have to go through the application process and interview process, unfortunately. And the other downside is that it is highly competitive, but that is the quickest way. Now, a common problem a lot of people go through is that they find out their degree isn't accredited by the IBMS, but it is still possible to become a BMS with a non-accredited biomedical science degree, or any life science related degree for that matter. So basically, an accredited degree means that it has a specific curricula set out by the HCPC. Now, if you want to become a biomedical scientist and you find out your degree isn't accredited, you can get it assessed by the IBMS. So the reason you need to get your degree assessed is to decide how many top-up modules you need to do. And this will depend on the content missing from your degree. In order to get your degree assessed, you will need to submit an authenticated transcript of all module marks, copies of all module descriptors, and a copy of your final year research project report, so like a dissertation or something. Now again, depending on how much content is missing from your degree, you'll have to do top-up modules at a university that does them. Unfortunately, you will have to study and pay for these. This is typically a common route for MLAs that want to become a biomedical scientist. So they do top-up modules part-time at a university that offers them. You can do them online. However, you need to find out which universities offer these online courses. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a biomedical science degree. It could be a life science related degree. But remember that the more content that is missing from your degree, the more top-up modules you will have to do. Now, if you did a master's course in biomedical science that is accredited, unfortunately, you will still have to get your degree assessed. It doesn't supersede the non-accredited bachelor's degree. So again, depending on the content that you didn't cover, you will have to do top-up modules to show that you've learned the necessary courses at a sufficient detail. And I've put a list of the UK universities that offer these IBMS accredited biomedical science top-up modules. Again, it will be in the description below. So the third and final route is if you haven't got a degree at all. But again, don't worry, there is still a route for you to go into being a biomedical scientist with no degree. And this can be done through apprenticeship schemes. The one you need to complete is the Level 6 Healthcare Science Practitioner Apprenticeship, which is the equivalent of an integrated degree. Soon this will be replaced by a Level 6 Biomedical Scientist Standard. So if you're watching this video quite a while later, it might have already changed. So keep that in mind when searching for these online. The only difference between the two is that the Level 6 Biomedical Scientist Standard has a different endpoint assessment. Now this endpoint assessment is the verification process that I told you I went through earlier on. and it requires you to get your IBMS registration training portfolio assessed by someone from the IBMS instead of a competency and independent assessment with an exam board. So again, you still have to do that registration training portfolio and your course at the same time. So it's like the integrated degree. And I'll put a link in the description of providers that do these apprenticeship schemes. So after completing the level 6 apprenticeship and completing the registration portfolio, all you have to do is apply to register for the HCPC to get your registration, and that's it. You're officially a biomedical scientist after that. So those are all the routes that you could take through to become a biomedical scientist. Now I've made a little summary diagram for this, so pause the video and have a look if you're still confused about what I talked about. But in all cases, you need to get that IBMS registration training portfolio done to become a biomedical scientist. Without it, you can't. So you need to get that certificate of competence, which allows you to get registered with the HCPC. I will be making more videos on exactly how to complete that portfolio and what you need to do. Now, as I mentioned, I'll put all the relevant links in the description below, so feel free to have a look if you want more information. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video useful. Take care.